Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stuart Binder-Macleod, and Aaron asked me to chair or lead this session today. I see the list here. I see Fabrizio, my neighbor down the hall, is online. Let's see. I'm not sure. Some of the other folks. Aaron, do people typically chime in during the session?
Yeah, they'll either chime in if they have questions or they'll wait to the end. So either one, but they're more than welcome if you're okay with it to go ahead and ask questions, and they can also utilize the chat option if they would like.
Okay. If each person online, if we can go down, just tell me a little bit about your, in terms of your, just what your current position is, just so I know a little bit about each of you. If we go down the list here, I see Fabrizio, you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Fabrizio Sergi, Assistant Professor of Biomedical Engineering. My research is in human interacting robotics.
Perfect. Jake D is next on the line. Jake?
He may have trouble with the mute, but Jake is one of our MRDA awardees. He is a surgeon, I want to say an ortho surgeon from MUSC. So Jake, if I butchered your specialty, I'm sorry, but I think I'm pretty close.
Well, welcome. Jennifer? She's muted, I see here. I'm not hearing from Jennifer.
So she just used the chat option. So she says that she's a clinician investigator at Christiana.
Welcome, Jennifer. In the med zone, I think Krishna's there.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Krishna White. I'm the chief of LS in medicine, but I'm also the PI on the ACCEL award about long-acting reversible contraception.
Welcome. And the next is it C? Chaim?
Yeah, this is Zicham. I'm the Associate Director of Research Informatics in the Value Institute in Christiana. My background is in industrial engineering, and I'm working on a few projects with predictive modeling and also utilizing computer simulation techniques.
Welcome. And great. And Zuju? I'm sure I'm butchering your name. The last person? Not sure. Aaron, do you know the last person on the list there? Zuge?
Let me see. I do not recognize this by first name.
Okay. So let me just, in terms of, from my perspective, ideally this would be a conversation, but I thought I would just lay out just chat a little bit to begin the conversation, if you will. If at any time anyone has any questions or any suggestions or any insights, please jump in. I have to start off with first apologizing. I have a pretty bad cold here, so I hope my voice holds out for at least the first half of this, when I'll probably do most of the talking. I just wanted to give you kind of a little bit of a background in terms of what I thought we would talk about during the session, a little bit about my career path, and then lay out some questions that I think are appropriate for each of us to address. So the session itself, I kind of thought that we would talk a little bit about what in the email that Aaron sent, between the balance between clinical responsibilities, administrative responsibilities, and research responsibilities. In fact, when I really should have, now I appreciate, given who's on the folks on the line here, I probably should have called it clinical/teaching. That is one group. The second is administrative, and the third is research. I think between all of us at different stages in our career, we have different responsibilities and opportunities. And I think we need to make decisions as to what opportunities we really would like to pursue. And what I thought we would chat about a little bit here is, when is it, I typically, when we take either a new academic job or a clinical position, we start off with, we're given clinical responsibilities or teaching responsibilities. And then we have to make decisions about when to take administrative responsibilities, or when or how do we grow our research portfolio. And I thought that would be the crux of this discussion. So let me tell you a little bit about my own professional development and see if any of you could relate to this. So first of all, I think most of you who know me, I'm old. So I started out as a physical therapist. And back, oh, did I just lose something here? No, I think, okay. My screen changed, but I think I'm okay now. Back when I started out as a physical therapist, I just have a bachelor's degree. So anyway, I graduated from State University of New York at Buffalo with a bachelor's degree in physical therapy. And I worked for 3 years full-time as a clinician. I had no administrative responsibilities and certainly no research responsibilities. But I realized at that point that I really wanted that I really wanted more out of my career. That I wasn't exactly sure what direction I was going, but I knew I wanted to pursue an academic career. At that point, I went back and got a master's degree. Actually, I got what was called a Master's in Medical Science from Emory University in education in the health professions. So I got my master's degree, and then I joined the faculty at Emory with a master's degree. And I primarily, not exclusively, taught for 5 years, teaching in the entry-level PT program at Emory University. I also was fortunate in that part of my time was bought out on a research grant, but I was more of a like a clinical scientist, if you will. But I realized at that point that I really wanted more out of my career than just teaching, and that I wanted to be more than just an assistant, if you will, on research programs, but I really wanted to lead my own research programs. So at that point, I went back to school again now for the third time and got my PhD. I have a PhD in neurophysiology from Medical College of Virginia. And after completion of my PhD, I took a faculty position here at the University of Delaware and really began my research career. I have to say that of the, so you can see I started out as purely a clinician. Then I really worked primarily as an educator. And then finally, in following completion of my PhD, had really a balance between education. I really didn't do any clinical work, I have to say, but really spent a good deal of my time being a researcher. I have to say that the most challenging aspect of my career certainly is taking on research responsibilities. For those of you who are new to this, one of the things that you have to appreciate as a clinician, we generally get lots and lots of positive feedback. We help our patients. Most patients improve. We also, as an educator, we write the exams. The student takes the exam. We're not being evaluated. Things change though as a researcher. I was just thinking of all the papers that I've published in my life, and I think they come to probably about 120 papers now. I've only had 2 papers that have been accepted on as submitted. Of the other 120 papers, I've had to submit them either to multiple journals, that is, they were rejected and then resubmitted somewhere else, or I had submitted them and they were, we had to make either moderate or major changes before they were accepted. So I guess what I'm saying is that what the whole notion of being a researcher, I think those of you who already have had experience realizing that we have there are a lot more failures than we have successes in terms of the number of times we have to submit manuscripts, and certainly that's true of grants. From the NIH, the typical success rate is somewhere around 10% of all grants. But you have to appreciate that first-time submissions are even lower, that the overall success rate of about 10% includes grants that are submitted the first time as well as resubmissions. And so it's you have to have a thick skin to be in this game. Any questions or comments from anyone? Aaron, I see that I no longer have your video. Am I still communicating with folks?
Yes, you are. It's just we turn it off up here because of streaming issues, but no, you are absolutely fine.
Okay, good. And I just found the chat button, and I see Jennifer's chat thing. I'll just leave that on. So, any comments, questions? If not, what I'm going to do next is I kind of outlined a series of questions that I think we each need to ask ourselves, and then I really just want to open up to any general discussion. I think that in terms of understanding the balance between our clinical/teaching responsibilities, administrative responsibilities, and research responsibilities, I think the first question that we have to ask ourselves is, what are our long-term career goals? That is, where do we want to see ourselves in 5 or 10 years from now? And I think that when you have, I think it's necessary, to have these long-term career goals to decide how much of each of these aspects of your professional career, how they should be weighted and where you should be putting your energy. The second question is, and I think you can see from my own career, is once you figure out what your long-term career goals, do you have the proper training? Is there additional training you should have, either in terms of formal training with respect to degrees or with respect to any techniques that you need to learn? The third question is, and I think this is a challenge for all of us, is what would be your ideal job? If you say, okay, this is where I want to be in 5 or 10 years from now, these are the skills that I think I need to get me there. Then the question is, what kind of job should you have now, and what should that lead to in 5 or 10 years from now? And the last question is what do I need to do to reach my goal? That is, I think you need to see what would be the ideal job, what training do you need, where do you want to go, and then make a decision about what changes you need to make in your current position. That is, can you or do you need to make changes within the current structure, or is there at some point do you need to start thinking about actually changing positions? Those are just some ideas that I had. Let me pause now and ask folks if there's any questions, comments that anyone would like to voice. I'm getting tired of hearing myself speak, so if anybody has any comments, I would love to hear it.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is Jen Goldstein. I guess I actually have a microphone.
Oh, great.
My question is, I think like everyone else, I'm a junior faculty member. I've been in my current position for 2 years, and I am gaining some administrative roles and have some upcoming teaching roles. And I also have my research and my clinical work. I don't know what I'm going to like. And so I know that I enjoy research, but I don't know how much I'm going to like teaching. I'm sure it's going to be hard at the beginning, but I don't want to dismiss it just because it's hard at the beginning. It might be something that I really love in the future. And so I feel like it might take me a little while to really figure out what my 3 to 5 year plan is. But people are always asking me, like I should already know.
Right. I think you raise a great point. It's something that I didn't, I mean, it's very hard to know what you want to do until you actually do it. And I think that's it. And if you could see with my career path, is that I actually experienced things. When I started out, I didn't know if I was going to be a researcher or not. I just knew, I worked a while as a clinician, and then I worked a while as pretty much a pure educator, and then worked a while as a researcher. And I think you raise a really, really good point. Until you actually do it. It's hard to know. Does anyone have any insight or suggestions into that process?
This is Ryan Arnold. I'm actually can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. Here you go. Hey Ryan, how you doing?
Good. How's it going? I work with Jen as well at Christiana in a similar fashion of, you know, early career investigator, kind of balancing between the education and the research. And I think one of the things that I've realized and with our department, I'm in emergency medicine, and what we have specifically you know, defined was an educator role and a researcher role. Because one thing I've realized now is I've been, you know, in the teaching role for all of my post, you know, residency career, was that they're very different skill sets. And the skill set to be a good educator and make a good lecture and keep the you know, attention of a resident is a very different skill set than writing a good grant or a good paper. And many of my faculty that are very interested in education and very good at it and get, you know, recognition and awards for it, don't have the interest nor even honestly the skill set to do aggressive, you know, funded research. And so, you know, I know Jen and I have talked a little bit about this and the environment at Christiana. You know, we also struggle with, and this is just another aside of Christiana's uniqueness that I think is different than the other networks in this ACCEL group, is that they are very much less on the side of understanding the value of the research and more understanding the value of the clinical time or the teaching time. So it's harder to explain to them why the grants are necessary from a institutional standpoint. They don't see that as, you know, so, but that being said, it's, you know, I've consciously pushed myself and our team to really define and separate our teaching roles, or, you know, a predominant teaching role from a predominant research role. And it is a challenge because it takes a lot more time to be a teacher than I think is appreciated sometimes, to put the lectures together and the time, and, you know, it's a very different but still time consuming, you know, skill set.
Yes. So Ren, I think you bring up, well, let Fabrizio, why don't you talk first? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a similar situation. This is my first year here as a assistant professor, and I did teach my first course this spring, and it was a core dynamics course for biomedical engineering. It did take time to prepare, but, you know, this is the job. We know that, and it definitely requires a different skill set than research and writing grants. Yes. But I think that's part of what we are here for, is to really realize how to manage both things. And although it is understood that your first year teaching a class, it's definitely a different commitment than the second year that you do. You know, still you get evaluations, and I have not opened mine, but you know, that's part of what the job is like, I think. So. Yes. That's part of the job, I think. Yes.
So one of the things that I think that certainly Ryan pointed out, and I think everyone is echoing here, is that in terms of really appreciating that, whether we talk about clinical or teaching and administrative and research, well, we haven't really touched on administration yet. We'll get to that in just a second. Is that they really are unique skill sets. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves in terms of what brings us the most satisfaction and reward. The other part of it is realizing, and I think that Ryan did touch on this, is that realizing in part, in the position that we're in, what does the institution really value, and making decisions about, are the institutional values in line with my own values. You know, I had to change positions. I could have stayed at Emory as an instructor, but you know, that I really realized that I needed to pursue a research career. I needed to come back and get additional training, but also I needed it to be in a very, very different position. Any other comments or discussion? If not, the question that I have to ask folks then is that, and I think all of us in terms of involved in academia or in healthcare, at some points in our career where we're tapped to take on more administrative positions. At least that's been my experience. When I first came to the University of Delaware, I really had to, and when I say administration, it's both administration and service responsibilities, things that are really taking away from my clinical or teaching and research experience, either chairing committees or providing other types of services. The question is, and this gets to an issue of balance, though. How much of that should you really be doing? And let me just put this out there. Is this a challenge for most of you folks? Are you challenged with knowing how much either service or administrative responsibilities to take on, or are you well protected by your department chairs or unit leaders?
Well, for myself, as of now, in my first year, I really had very reduced and not much of administrative, part of a committee seminar committee where you select speakers and some evaluation of grad students, but some thesis committee, one or two, but I feel that's not been a huge commitment so far.
Yeah. You're lucky so far. What about the clinicians? Are there challenges? Are you asked to serve on committees and do other things that really detract from your primary responsibilities?
This is Sarah Slovin. I think one of the great pieces of advice that I've gotten over the past year is trying to make sure that what I serve on aligns with my either clinical or research interests. So I'm particularly interested in EMR, so now I'm on the EMR task force and stuff like that. I still struggle with the spillover of the clinical administrative time into sort of my writing or other time, because patient care always sort of needs to come first. Granted, there's varying levels of what's actually urgent and needing to be addressed that time, but that's my particular challenge.
Yes. So I think you raise a very good issue here. And one of the things that I've talked about, one of the things that I didn't say is that I served for 16 and a half years as the chair of the PT department here at the University of Delaware. And there are two things that I would tell the junior faculty members. First, that exactly, you hit the nail on the head, that making sure that any service responsibilities that you take on really does align with your career goals. You want to do things that move you forward, not, kind of take you to the side or actually even move backwards. The other thing is that if a lot of my faculty members, I was very fortunate in chairing a department of very talented faculty members, they're asked, there are many different tugs on their time. They're either, other professional responsibilities or journals or organizations are always asked them. And what I always told folks, never say yes to any request. If somebody gives you a request, say, would you like to be on this editorial board? Or would you be willing to chair the search committee or to do some other activity? Always just say, let me talk to my chair and get back to you. And I think having that little bit of time gives you an opportunity both to reflect, to say, is this really moving my career forward? And the other thing is I would tell my faculty is blame it on me. If there's somebody asked you to serve on a search committee and you realize this is going to really be a time sink and it's really not going to help me, blame it on the chair. Say, I talked it over with my chair and my chair really thinks that this is not the best thing for me to do. And I think that is really helpful. That's one of the things that I learned is never to respond immediately, but tell somebody you'll get back to them. And I think that's really saved me in the end a lot of time of serving on committees that are really, really not moving my career in the right direction. Does anybody else have any other suggestions or tricks in terms of knowing how to in managing your time or your commitments? Okay. Hearing, I don't see anybody chiming in. So does anybody have any other questions or comments or anything they'd like to discuss? People are quiet here. Let's see. Okay. Hearing nothing else, I'm not sure if there's much else that. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Sorry, I guess, in terms of are there any particular organizational time management strategies that you find to be particularly effective for you to sort of help balance everything?
Well, I think that one of the things that I suggest is, and I think most folks do this, is that you have to set aside time. Once you identify your priorities, I think almost everyone will tell you that if you, let's say, it's easiest for me to relate to within the research realm. But let's say you want to set a goal that you're going to write one paper a year, whatever that may be. I think what you need to do is set aside time so that whether it's every day, every week, or every other week, you set aside a block of time, and during that time, you're going to write. I think if you don't do that, things are going to get just keep getting pushed off. So the most important thing is understanding what's important and setting goals, and secondly, aligning your schedule with those goals. And the other part of it is forming, if you will, a team or other support personnel. Whether there are some activities that you really do in isolation, but there are other activities that really, I think, are helpful to do as a group. I think, for instance, this session that we're having now, I think it's important to get together with other junior investigators or maybe even senior mentors on a regular basis to help to, if you will, to right the ship here, making sure you're going in the right direction. So I think it starts with understanding what you really want to do and how important it's to you, then assigning time to do that, and then particular activities. And other than that, I'm not sure if I have any great insight. I would always schedule some time where I would, fortunately in an academic position, I would stay home mornings, and when, the house was quiet, I would just write during those times. If I didn't have those times, I would never get anything done. Another thing that I know that, let me just throw out there, is being disciplined with, this is more related to academics, but like saying, I'm going to check my emails twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, and I'm not going to check them, because you can spend all day just responding to emails. The other thing that I did which was really helpful to me is trying to, basically with respect to my whether it be email or in the old days with, snail mail, is one-timing things. That is, I would go into the mail room and open up my mail right in the mail room, and whatever and I would try to respond immediately. So things would either go right into the trash, they would go if it's something that I could handle with very, immediately, I would respond, or it would go into a third pile that says this is going to be handled later during the time with which I'm going to address all of my emails or all my snail mails. So that I would try not to read my email and then come back and then respond again. So it's really just handling each piece of email or snail mail one time. I found to be really, really helpful, particularly when I was a department chair. So those are strategies that I've used. Does that make sense to folks?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other ideas or techniques that you have for being more efficient? I'm sure we'd all like to hear.
I think, one thing I'll add on the writing, I think that, you've touched on what we've struggled with and talked about is setting deadlines or a group of kind of writers within your, your young investigator or just investigator interest group that are like-minded, knowing that we can all make national meetings because they have abstract deadlines, but to translate that into a paper, there's no longer a deadline. So sometimes, like what we're trying to do with our faculty positions and talking to them, and which is again the same challenge we have internally, which is trying to get put a deadline on a thing that does not have a deadline, which is a paper. So we're trying to push people to say, all right, get me, let's have a collective kind of commitment to produce this part of the work by this month, and then you have your that way there's some kind of ownership to saying we paid to send you to this conference, now try to get your work into publication, because we've seen now, and I'll tell you just that when you see those papers go into publication, the abstracts and the meetings, no one remembers those things, but they know the publication, they can reference that. So we know it's important. We just don't prioritize it in our life. And I think that it's just really challenging because there is no deadline there. And there's no one, honestly, especially at our institution, that's pushing us to write them. So right. We have to instill our own deadline on something that no one's asking us to produce on.
Right. Right, you reminded me of the two things just to share that's you're bang on there in terms of this whole notion of deadlines. I think you have to, draw lines in the sand and say, okay, we're going to get this done by this time. There were two things. One, my advisor had a little index card on his door that said basically using mathematical formulas, as time goes to infinity, effort goes to zero, and as time goes to zero, effort goes to infinity. Which really means we always do everything at the last minute. I mean, that's just human nature. And I think there's something to learn from that. That the only way something's going to get done is if you have a deadline. If you have this kind of amorphous kind of goal, it's never going to happen. The other thing I just want to share with folks, and this is something that I've discussed this a lot with colleagues, and that is the whole notion is, and I forget the exact saying, but essentially, that perfection is the enemy of the good. That is, you say, okay, I'm going to write this manuscript. And there are individuals who have been writing that same manuscript for decades now because it's not perfect. You need to nothing is ever going to be perfect. And this has to do with a deadline saying, you need to say, okay, I'm going to get this manuscript out by July 30th. And I'm going to do my best. It's not going to be perfect. You know that. But I'm going to get it out. And there's you have to weigh that balance between saying, oh, this is really not ready, and really it's perfect. It's never going to be perfect. And you have to have the right balance there. And I think that's when you need to have colleagues say, this is when good enough is good enough to get it out. Because it could be, if you wait for perfection, it's going to paralyze you. You're never going to get anything done. So you need to have that balance as well. Any other comments? Without that, does anybody have any other questions or topics they'd like to discuss? Any particular challenges that any of you are facing with respect to, I think the common top, oftentimes people talk about, work-life balance. I think that's a whole other issue, but I'm really thought we would talk about the balance within work. That is, how do you balance the different roles and responsibilities that each of us have? And I think they change over time. I think as Fabrizio mentioned, when you're more junior, you probably have fewer administrative or service responsibilities. As you become more senior, those roles and responsibilities grow. And then finally, later in your career, to be honest, I'm at a point where I am reducing my research responsibilities and really substantially increasing my administrative, my service, and I think mentoring responsibilities.
Hello.
Sorry.
Yes. Richard, did you want to say something?
No. No, I mean, I agree with most of the points. I mean, these are really things that are useful to hear and to keep telling each other, because there are difficulties in managing oneself's time in the early career. It's usually it's usually harder, and I agree. I mean, I also have some little tool that I use to take notes of ideas for research projects that I put all in an Evernote. I use Evernote for taking notes. So when there is a student that will ask me, what do you want to do? What would you want me to do? Then there's always possibility to get started from something. But really, I'm not here to give advice. Actually, I'm just here to hear, and all the things I've heard really make a lot of sense.
Yeah. No, I think we're here to share. I remember, so as I said, I'm old. That I was, when I first started out, there weren't even computers. So I always had a file, and I still have it here somewhere. And I called it Bright Ideas. Whenever I would go to a seminar or a conference, and I thought, wow, this is something I'd really like to do in the future, I'd write it down on a piece of paper and stick it in this bright idea. And you're right. And then if a student came to me, or if I had some time and was thinking about my next project, I'd open it up and say, oh, let's see, which of these bright ideas should I consider pursuing next? So I think it's good to do that. I really like that idea. I hate to say, as I get older, fewer and fewer bright ideas, though, I must say.
Or maybe you know better which one don't work. Like.
Yeah, well, there may be some truth to that. So I think just in some ways summarizing what we've said is in terms of really, I think it's identifying priorities, setting deadlines, and then really working to meet those deadlines, appreciating that whatever we do is never going to be perfect, but we have to, that there's a value in actually meeting the deadline, whether we're talking about a grant submission, a manuscript submission, or even a abstract presentation. I think the abstracts, as Ryan mentioned, in some ways are easiest because they tend to have their own deadlines. Grants, there are, if we talk about NIH grants, there are 3 times a year deadlines. There are, if we talk about other agencies, they may be biannual or maybe annual. But I think that the trick is committing to ourselves and to our colleagues, saying we're going to make this deadline, and getting something out there. I mean, there are a lot of trite sayings, but they're true though. You don't get 100% of the grants that you don't apply for. That is, if you never apply for a grant, you're never going to get it. So you really have to, just like the lottery, you have to play to win. So the trick is submitting, whether it be manuscripts, abstracts, or grants. I'm not sure if that's very helpful saying that, but it's true. Any other comments or items for discussion? Okay. Aaron, is there anything else that you want me that I need to follow up with here? If not, I'll just appreciate everyone's time here. If anyone has any follow-up questions, I'd like to discuss anything in the future, I'd be more than happy to meet with you either one-on-one or on the phone or via a Blue Jeans meeting. This has been thanks for the opportunity to chat with you, and I'll wish everyone a good afternoon then. Take care.
Thanks. Take care.
Thanks.
Okay.